The 10 most notorious and dangerous women of the Bible. The Bible, a sacred book, is also a compendium of fascinating stories and iconic characters that captivate even non-believers. Among its pages, we find the narrative of Christian goodness in the Catholic belief. However, we sometimes forget that there are characters who defy the expectations of this book and showcase their dark side. In this video, we will tell you the stories of 10 women who stand out in the Bible for the evilness of their actions or intentions. From the Philistine who betrayed the mighty Samson, to the pagan wife who plotted a death, and the illegitimate wife who caused the demise of the Baptist, join us on this journey through biblical passages to discover these characters and their tales that have survived for centuries to the present day. But before we delve into the details, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate notifications to stay up to date with our updates. Number 10, Sapphira, who lied to God. In the book of Acts, the story of Sapphira and her husband Ananias is narrated. It was the early days of the church, with the apostles spreading the news of Christ's resurrection and gaining new followers. Peter and John were performing miracles and healings, and the atmosphere was joyful. All the believers shared and distributed money among themselves according to each one's needs. Enter Ananias and Sapphira into the story. They sold a piece of their property and agreed to hide part of the money. They gave only a fraction of the sale to the apostles and pretended it was the full amount. According to the biblical account, the apostle Peter, guided by the Holy Spirit, realized the deception. He confronted Ananias, saying, "You have not lied just to human beings but to God." Ananias fell dead immediately. 3 hours later, Sapphira arrived, and Peter asked her if the amount her husband had given was the total of the sale, as they had agreed. She repeated Ananias' lie. Peter then asked her why they conspired to test the Spirit of the Lord. Like her husband, Sapphira fell dead at Peter's feet. They were not given a second chance or an opportunity to repent. Number 9, the Samaritan woman and Jesus' teachings. In the book of John, we find the story of the Samaritan woman and her encounter with Jesus Christ. At that time, Jews and Samaritans held a mutual disdain that had been inherited through generations. During a journey between Judea and Galilee, the Apostle John tells us that Jesus passed through Samaria. It was late in the day, and he was a little tired, so he sat down to rest near Jacob's well. Then a Samaritan woman came to the well, and Jesus asked her for a drink of water. In those times, women from respectable families fetched water in the cold mornings, while women with less than ideal reputations came in the hot afternoons to avoid the judgmental gaze of society. So, the Samaritan woman was surprised that Jesus, being a Jew, would even speak to her. "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. Why are you asking me for a drink?" she said. Jesus replied that if she knew who he was, she would ask, and he would give her living water. Perplexed, she asked him how he expected her to give him water when he had no bucket or rope. She also challenged him, asking if he thought he was greater than their ancestor Jacob, the great Samaritan patriarch. Jesus then asked her to call her husband. She replied that she had no husband. Jesus revealed that she had indeed spoken the truth, for she had had 5 husbands and was currently not married. At this moment, Jesus revealed himself as the Messiah, which he had foretold. The Samaritan woman, who had initially doubted Christ and questioned him, became so excited that she left her water jar behind and ran to the town to tell everyone the news. Several Samaritans followed her, and Jesus stayed there for 2 days, conversing with the new believers. Despite her questionable reputation and initial doubt and challenge towards Christ, the Samaritan woman became instrumental in bringing new believers to the Messiah. Number 8, Herodias and her contempt for the Baptist. Herodias, a princess of the Herodian dynasty in Judea during the Roman Empire, was the granddaughter of Herod the Great. She married two of her uncles, Herod II and Herod Antipas. The Bible describes her as an ambitious and ruthless woman, who despised John the Baptist because he opposed her second marriage. According to the Gospels of Matthew and Mark, Herodias was married to her uncle Herod II but decided to divorce him and marry again, this time with Herod Antipas, her uncle and brother of her first husband. Divorce was strongly frowned upon during that time, going against Christian beliefs. This is why John the Baptist opposed this second union. Full of rage against the Baptist, Herodias devised a plan for revenge. She arranged an elaborate birthday feast in honor of Herod Antipas. During the celebration, she asked her daughter Salome, whom she had with her first husband, to dance as a gift for Herod and his guests. The king was so pleased with Salome's dance, who, we must remember, was his niece, that he promised to fulfill any request she had in her heart. Salome consulted her mother and surprised everyone by asking for one of the most severe gifts that could be expected, the head of John the Baptist, served on a platter. According to the Gospel of Mark, Antipas did not want to execute John the Baptist because he enjoyed listening to his sermons and feared that his murder would cause a rebellion among his followers. However, accounts from the historian Flavius Josephus indicate that John the Baptist was executed in the fortress of Machaerus by order of Herod Antipas. Number 7, Athaliah, the Queen of Judah. Athaliah was the daughter of King Ahab and Queen Jezebel of Israel and became the consort queen of Judah through her marriage to King Jehoram. Their union was a result of a treaty between the kingdoms of Israel and Judah. Jehoram, in order to secure his position as monarch, murdered his 6 brothers. However, his reign was already unstable, and it further weakened after the Edom rebellion, which forced Jehoram to recognize their independence. The royal palace was subsequently raided by Philistines, Arabs, and Ethiopians, resulting in the death of almost the entire family. Only the youngest son, Joash, who was 22 years old, survived. After the death of King Jehoram, Athaliah acted as a queen mother. However, Ochozias, her son, had a brief reign. Just a year later, he was assassinated during a state visit to Israel. Who, acting on behalf of Yahweh, executed the young king and assumed the throne as the king of Israel. He ordered the execution of the entire family of Athaliah, who lived in the region of Samaria and practiced mythological and polytheistic beliefs. Upon hearing the news, Athaliah forcefully took the throne of Judah and ordered the execution of anyone who had a possibility of claiming the kingdom's inheritance, including her own grandchildren. As the usurping queen, Athaliah imposed the worship of the deity Baal from Canaanite mythology in Judah. However, 6 years later, a priest revealed that the heir, Joash, had survived. He proclaimed Joash as the rightful king of Judah. Athaliah attempted to suppress the rebellion, but she failed. She was captured and executed. Number 6, Jezebel, a cruel queen. The story of Jezebel is recounted in the books of Kings in the Bible. Jezebel is depicted as a Phoenician princess, the daughter of the king of Tyre. According to genealogies by historians like Flavius Josephus, she was the great-aunt of Dido, the queen of Carthage. Jezebel married the king of Israel and became the mother of Athaliah, as we have mentioned before. Jezebel's coronation brought a religious imbalance to Israel at that time. She did not believe in Yahweh but instead practiced the worship of the deity Baal. Due to her power and influence as queen, Jezebel eventually promoted and imposed the worship of Baal, displacing the belief in Yahweh. The problem was not only the lack of faith in God but also the consequences of imposing this belief. Jezebel conducted a continuous and massive purge of Yahweh's prophets throughout the territory of Israel. According to the Bible, most surviving believers were spared thanks to the protection of Obadiah, who belonged to the court of King Ahab. He maintained his faith in Yahweh and hid many prophets and believers in caves to protect them. The prophet Elijah then challenged Jezebel and her prophets of Baal to a confrontation on Mount Carmel. The challenge was to demonstrate which deity was the true God. Both sides were to offer a bull as a sacrifice, and the true God would ignite the fire on the altar for the sacrifice. Despite their chants and prayers, the prophets of Baal failed to ignite their sacrifice. In contrast, Elijah called upon Yahweh, and fire descended from the sky, consuming the offering. This spectacle impressed the people of Israel. Afterward, Elijah ordered the capture and execution of the prophets of Baal. Following this purge, Queen Jezebel threatened Elijah, declaring that she would end the lives of the murdered prophets. Even if it meant facing divine judgment, Elijah fled to the wilderness to save himself. From there, he lamented being the last believer of Yahweh. However, victory was short-lived for Jezebel. After a swift succession of reigns, 3 years after King Ahab's death, his son ascended to the throne and subsequently died, leaving Joram to assume kingship. Then, the prophet Elisha, successor to Elijah, instructed one of his disciples, Jehu, the commander of Joram's army, to become the instrument of punishment for the house of Ahab and Jezebel. Jehu arrived to punish the dynasty of Ahab and Jezebel. Jezebel, after being thrown from the window of her room by her own servants, was trampled by Jehu's horse. Jehu entered the palace, had a feast, and then ordered Jezebel's already deceased body to be buried. However, by then, dogs from the street had eaten her remains, just as the prophet Elijah had foretold. Number 5, Gomer, the wife of Hosea. The book of Hosea tells the story of Gomer, the wife of Hosea. She is described as a promiscuous woman and essentially a prostitute. The narrative states that Gomer abandoned the prophet Hosea to pursue relationships with multiple lovers. However, her lifestyle quickly led to ruin, and she was forced to sell herself as a slave to pay her debts. Despite her betrayal, Hosea rescued her, paid off her debts, and took her back into his home. The story of Gomer serves as an allegory for God's love for all and, particularly, his capacity for mercy towards those who committed spiritual adultery by worshipping other deities. Eventually, they learned the true meaning of love through their belief in the Catholic God. Number 4, the Witch of Endor. The Witch of Endor, also known as the Medium of Endor, is a character in the first book of Samuel. According to the biblical narrative, King Saul of Israel was in desperate need of God's counsel in the face of a Philistine army that was threatening his kingdom. The prophet Samuel had died, so the king sought other ways to receive guidance from God. However, he was unable to receive any words from God in his dreams or through other prophets. As the king himself had expelled all sorcerers from Israel, he anonymously sought out a witch in the village of Endor. The king disguised himself to conceal his identity and crossed enemy lines to reach the village where the witch was located. He asked her to bring the prophet Samuel back to life. Although the woman originally refused this request due to the prohibition of sorcery that King Saul had ordered, the disguised monarch convinced her by asserting that she would not be punished. However, the king's identity was discovered when the witch summoned a spirit and confronted him about the deception. The king swore to her again that he would not punish her. Then the witch became the bearer of bad news. The spirit claimed that Saul and his army would be defeated, and that the king and his sons would also become spirits. The next day, the witch consoled the king, but the warning came to pass. The Israeli forces were defeated, and Saul was wounded in battle. He later took his own life. The Book of Chronicles states that Saul's fate was a punishment for seeking the counsel of sorcery rather than from God himself. Number 3, Delilah, the wicked lover of Samson. The Book of Judges tells the story of Samson, one of the last judges of Israel before the establishment of the monarchy. Samson possessed incredible and superhuman strength, which allowed him to achieve unimaginable feats, such as killing a lion with his bare hands or defeating an entire army of Philistines using only the jawbone of a donkey. However, the source of Samson's strength was his hair. If it were ever cut, he would lose all his power. According to the biblical narrative, Samson fell in love with Delilah, who was his partner but not his wife. It is not mentioned in the story that Delilah loved him in return. In fact, according to the story, Delilah was bribed by the Philistines to discover the source of Samson's strength. They offered her 1,100 pieces of silver. Delilah attempted to uncover the secret on 3 occasions, using various methods to deceive him. She finally succeeded on the 3rd attempt by directly asking Samson, and manipulating him, claiming that she didn't trust him if he couldn't reveal it. When Samson revealed the source of his strength, Delilah waited for him to fall asleep and ordered a servant to cut his hair. Samson woke up in a weakened state, and Delilah handed him over to the Philistine leaders. The Bible does not account for what happened to Delilah afterward or explore whether she ever felt remorse for her actions. Number 2. The deceitful wife of Potiphar. In the book of Genesis, the story is told of Potiphar's wife, who was married to Potiphar, the captain of Pharaoh's guard during the time of Jacob and his 12 sons. The biblical narrative does not give a name to Potiphar's wife, it simply recounts her actions. According to the biblical account, Potiphar's wife was attracted to Joseph, Jacob's favored son. Due to this favoritism, Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery in Egypt. Joseph became a slave in Potiphar's household, but he did not reciprocate Potiphar's wife's advances. She made multiple attempts to seduce Joseph, but he consistently rejected her. Frustrated by her inability to convince him to commit adultery, Potiphar's wife devised a strategy. One day, when they were alone in the house, she made another attempt to seduce him. When she was rejected again, she threw a tantrum and falsely accused Joseph of attempting to force himself on her. Joseph was imprisoned for years as a result of this accusation. However, the book of Genesis recounts that he eventually rose to the second highest position of leadership in Egypt after accurately interpreting Pharaoh's dreams and subsequently saving the country from a famine. Number 1. Tamar, the wife of Judah. Also recounted in the book of Genesis, Tamar was the daughter-in-law of Judah, one of Jacob's sons. She was also the mother of 2 of his children. According to the biblical narrative, Tamar was married to Judah's oldest son, who was killed by God due to his wickedness. Following the levirate marriage custom, which involves a widow marrying her deceased husband's brother, Judah asked his second son, Onan, to have a child with Tamar to maintain the family line. However, when they consummated their relationship, Onan practiced withdrawal as a method of contraception, which angered God, resulting in his death, similar to his brother. At this point, Judah became convinced that Tamar was cursed and hesitated to give her to his third son in marriage. Over time, Judah's wife passed away. One day, while he was alone shearing his sheep, Tamar disguised herself as a prostitute, and positioned herself in a village along Judah's route. When Judah encountered her, thinking she was a prostitute, he hired her services. Thus, Tamar's plan to become pregnant and maintain her status as part of Judah's lineage was fulfilled. After their encounter, Judah gave her his staff and seal as collateral, promising to send her a goat as payment for her services. However, when the goat arrived, nobody knew who the prostitute was. She was no longer in the village. 3 months later, Tamar was accused of selling her body because she didn't have a partner to justify her pregnancy. Judah ordered her to be burned to death. However, Tamar sent a package to Judah containing his staff and seal, revealing that he was the one responsible for her pregnancy. Judah understood the message, released Tamar from her sentence, and she secured her place within the family. She gave birth to twin sons. When revisiting these biblical stories, it is important to note that the values reflected in them are very different from those of our present society. In most cases, the women considered bad in the biblical accounts could be seen as victims of circumstances or, at the very least, as the true losers in a distorted version of history. However, while it is crucial to reflect on these stories, it cannot be doubted that, beyond religious beliefs, the Bible is full of fascinating and fantastic narratives that can rival modern literature. We hope this video has been informative. If you have anything to add, please share it with us in the comments section. Like this video and share the link with your family and friends so they can also learn about the 10 most dangerous and wicked women of the Bible. Thanks for watching. If you found this video interesting, make sure to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. We'll be back soon with more curiosities from history.